You are free to choose, but are not free from the consequences of that choice. This is the Wisdom Worth Knowing podcast. I'm your host, Craig Chamberlain. Thank you for joining me today. If it's your first time, you can subscribe on any channel where podcasts are broadcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or you can join us live on YouTube, Facebook, or Rumble. The live stream is every day around 6 a.m., and you can participate in the live chat and discussion time. This show is brought to you by Audible, where listening is the new reading. Get unlimited access to thousands of audiobooks completely free for 30 days. Sign up right now at audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. That's audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. You are free to choose, but are not free from the consequences of that choice. Wow, you guys chose a heavy topic for today. For those who don't know or are new to the show, the topic is actually selected by the community based on the feedback I get on the Facebook page. And this one is this one's about the ultimate boomerang of reality that can come back and smack you right in the face. And this has definitely been true in my life. You know, this is no joke. We are all free to choose, that darn free will. The you are free to choose part is what I want to kind of talk about today. We like to unpack the topic here for the first part of the show, and then we move into the discussion time. So I monitor the chat live on Facebook and YouTube. Unfortunately, I can't monitor it live on Rumble at the moment, but hopefully that changes. We unpack it, and then we move into that discussion time. So, choice. We are creatures of free will. What does that even mean? Well, it means our will is free. We have the ability, the unique ability of choice. And most people don't even think about this. We are so unconscious to the reality that we make choices. You know, a lot of people don't even stop to think about the reality that if you look at a different creature of any kind, other than the human being, C.S. Lewis talks about this a lot in his book, Mere Christianity, but at the beginning of that book, he talks about basic fundamental logic of ethics and philosophy. Great book, by the way, even if you're not, actually, especially if you're not a Christian, because it kind of talks about a lot of the stuff that basic fundamentals of reality, the natural law, things like that. He doesn't even talk about Christianity about halfway through the book. The first part is just basic ethics and basic philosophy. That book saved me, by the way. Mere Christianity. But he does talk about how we as creatures are very peculiar, and it's fun to read him because he's got this poetic language about him and just this down to earth approach to philosophy and ethics that's really palatable, I guess. It's like, because you can get really some obnoxious stuff with philosophy. The philosophizers. He wasn't much of a philosophizer. But basically, he does talk about how we make these. We are the only creatures, and I tend to agree with this. We're the only creatures who not only have the ability to choose, but we also have the ability to evaluate choices, which makes us unique. And not only that, but we have a tendency to make the wrong choice. Like, every time. Like, even if we know what's best for us. And this is for things like as simple as taking care of ourselves or just having basic manners and basic decency. He's like, he talks about how we have this natural law that presses on us to just be this internal law that's pressing on us to be basically decent people. And then we have to constantly rationalize away why we don't make those choices. And it's like, if you think about it, animals don't struggle with that. They don't sit there and question their existence and the choices they're making. They just make choices. I don't even know if they make choices. They're like on autopilot because they're animals. But we have that nasty conscience that comes in, and it causes us to evaluate. And we can get into the psychology of that, and I don't think that's really that important, to be honest with you. We could get lost in the the mess of that for hours. But the truth is we can't deny that we do make choices. We have a unique position of consciousness in which we can look at a situation and we can evaluate it, and then we can choose how to respond to it. So that's something we don't stop to consider, that we actually have choice. The second thing, which is the second part of that sentence, or that quote you chose, is, but we are not free from the consequences of that choice. So the implication of this quote to me is that there is a reality that exists that is outside of our control. And I do think this kind of points to the natural law. If you don't know what natural law is, you can look it up. But in a nutshell, natural law is the idea that there is a natural order to the moral universe that presses on us. It's the basic gist of it. Pardon me if I'm paraphrasing and you're a philosopher listening to this show. But the basic gist of it is there's a natural law that is pressing on us, like a moral law that exists, and all men and women are subject to it. And there are certain consequences if we do not listen and follow it. That's the basic gist of natural law. For example, consequences could be with basic finance. We are free to choose to spend all of our money the second we get it, but we are not free to deal with what happens next. We can't burn through everything that we have constantly and expect stability, financial stability, security of any kind, long-term security or long-term stability, a foundation of confidence with future purchases. So we're free to choose to burn through all of our money, but we are not free from the consequences of that choice if we make the wrong one. But there's a right choice too. If we choose to save a small portion of our money, well then we get to enjoy the fruits of the consequences of that choice. Not all consequences are bad. In fact, I would argue that there are choices we can make in which the consequences are regularly good. The natural law doesn't care. And that's something that I think people really don't fully grasp. First, they don't even know the natural law exists, arguably. And second of all, we assume that it's always working against us. In my experience, I believe this law of morality is neutral. I don't think it really... I mean, we can get into the existential part where religion is involved, but we're not even talking about religion right now. But I think it's more like gravity or mathematics, in which there is a fundamental cause and effect to all of the choices we make that is just governed by the natural rules of reality. In other words, finance is a perfect example. There's a natural reality to the fact that time passes, and as time passes, things dissolve and decay. And if we are not diligent about saving for when things dissolve and decay, then there are consequences to ignoring that reality. And there's religion has nothing to do with that. Now, I think religion does a good job of explaining how you can do that. And as a Christian, I believe that, God helps us understand and better work through the natural law, but you don't even have to be religious to at least acknowledge the fact that there are realities that exist, whether we like to believe they exist or not. Think of other choices we could make professionally, not just financially. We can choose to just show up at work every day and go through the motions and not try to be a decent employee or reliable. But we're not free from the consequences of what that apathy produces. Do we really want to move up where we're at? Do we want to become more valuable where we're at? not just professionally, but maybe extracurricularly. If we're showing up to our favorite hobby or a gaming session or whatever it is we're doing, are we trying to do it well? If we're not, we're just going through the motions, which is understandable, by the way, because a lot of us are just exhausted. That's a choice we make, and we are not free from the consequences of that choice. Now, if we show up and we do our best, and we put in that extra 100, 110%, there's good consequences to that as well, right? What else do we got? Do we burn bridges relationally? Do we neglect those who are valuable to us or should be valuable to us? Friends, family, loved ones. Are we dedicating and committing ourselves to them in healthy ways? Do we treat people with respect? Are we polite? Do we use tact when we're being honest with them? Do we listen? Do we listen? That's a big one. We can use people. Then we may be able to get from them what we want. And that is a choice we can make. But we are not free from the consequences of abusing each other relationally. What we're going to lose is we're going to lose intimacy. We're going to lose connection. We're going to lose the reward that comes with making emotional deposits into people, which is generally allowing relationships to be fruitful. Or we make a good choice and we try our best to invest in those relationships. We try to be there for people. We try to treat them with respect and basic decency. And we get the positive results, positive consequences. The real difficulty, and Lewis does talk about this, it is like hard as nails to make the latter choice, to make the choice that results in the fruitfulness, to make the choice that has the positive consequences. First, we have to acknowledge that we have choice, that the world and earth does not just happen to us. We have brains. We have the ability to reason. We can learn. We can adapt. But we have to choose to do those things. And we either are embracing that reality or we're denying it. So if we deny we even have choice, we fail from the very beginning. If we sit around and believe that the world, and there are aspects of the world that do just happen to us and we don't have control over them, but if we think every part of the world just happens to us, whether we like it or not, and we have no ability to listen to and respond to the world in a positive way, or in a way that is constructive, or a way that is at least in line with reality, cause and effect, basic cause and effect. If we don't even agree that exists, if we basically fundamentally either think we don't have choice or that our choices don't matter, we failed before we even started. So if we don't acknowledge that part, that we even have choice, that's the first stumbling block. The second is acknowledging that there are consequences to each of our choices. Actually, that reminds me of a movie. It was actually a thriller from the 80s. Great film. It's kind of science fiction-y. It's called Flatliners. If you have not seen this film, it's fantastic. Kiefer Sutherland, before 24, which 24 is amazing also, but great film, great cast. I caught it on accident when TiVo first came out. TiVo, that first came out, it was amazing. Now we can have everything on demand. But great film on this cause and effect. There's a line in it. He says everything we do matters. Every choice, every small choice we make matters. Because every choice we make has consequences. It's actually a great film that depicts that. But if we deny the fact that all of our choices actually have consequences, that's the secondary problem. Or we just ignore the consequences. I think a lot of people struggle with this second part of the consequences is because so many of our comforts prevent the consequences from hurting us severely. So like we are so blessed and lucky right now as a culture, collectively, that we can make a lot of bad choices and still be fine. Or be good enough, you know? Well, somebody will take care of those consequences outside of us. Just society in general will absorb the consequences. Once upon a time, if you made bad choices, it would boomerang on you very, very quickly and put you in life or death situations. It wasn't maybe 100 years ago, in which reality would smack you right in the face pretty quickly. And then you would either have to learn, adapt, or die. I mean, like, literally. That's not a reality we face today. Like, it's very weird that right now, if we want to be in growth positions, we actually have to voluntarily seek out the consequences because they're not always obvious. So that's I think that's the second stumbling block is refusing to acknowledge that consequences exist. That there is a rule of reality that will boomerang on us if we don't make the right choices. It's easier just to ignore both of these and just do whatever we want. I know I'm guilty of this, especially if it's something we really want. If it's something we really want, then we'll consequences. We'll just ignore the fact that there are consequences, right? And we'll just do whatever we want. We'll do what we want anyway. Because it's what we want to do. If you're joining us just now, this is the Wisdom Worth Knowing podcast. Wisdom Worth Knowing is brought to you by Amazon Audible. If you're like me and you love reading but don't have the time, then Audible audiobooks may be a perfect solution for you. With Audible, listening is the new reading. You can pop in your earbuds and discover that next exciting adventure or expand your knowledge from any PC, Mac, Android, or Apple device. And check this out. Because you listen to this show, for a limited time, you can get instant access to thousands of audiobooks from Audible's Premium Plus catalog completely free. Just visit audible.wisdomworthknowing.org right now and take advantage of a free 30-day trial. That's right, for 30 days you get full access to Audible's Premium Plus catalog, as well as an additional free title of your choosing. If you discover audiobooks are not for you, no problem. You can cancel instantly online. That's it. It's that simple. 2 years ago, audiobooks began to change my life, and they may change yours too. Pause this podcast and head over to Audible. That's audible.wisdomworthknowing.org and sign up right now. So we're going to move into the discussion time. If you are on Facebook and YouTube, you can actually post your comments right on there. And I don't expect a lot of activity on the discussion time typically because this show just started only like 2 weeks ago. What episode are we on? 18? Maybe 18 days ago. How many weeks is that? That's about a week and 2.5 weeks ago. And there's two things that are going to hinder the live chat portion of the show. The first thing is that the show starts at 6 a.m. So I've got a family and a full-time job. This is literally the only time of day in which I can do a live stream. So generally speaking, we're not going to get a huge turnout because that's 6 a.m. Eastern. I mean, most normal people are not up this early. And if they're up this early, they're not participating in a live chat or on Facebook for 30 minutes. But that's part of the reason the show goes straight to podcast right after we broadcast it, because then people can consume it after the fact. So if I do look at the comment section, it looks like Becky says, "Good morning. Not all choices are bad." Right, exactly. Our choices are our choices. Also, hi, Mom. Our choices are our choices, right? Not all choices are bad, and sometimes we don't even know if they're good or bad. Like, we just make choices. You know, and we don't even find out later that it was a bad choice. Sometimes we just make the best choice we can in that situation and hope for the best. But there is a reality that governs our choices. You know, I believe that. And because we have a finite knowledge, we cannot possibly know all the consequences of those choices. And so I think there's utility in being a Christian and having a prayer life, because you can kind of tap into, if you believe in Christianity and the Holy Spirit, you can tap into and have conversations with God, right, about the potential consequences. And it gives you that that contemplative connection that allows you to try to make a better choice. You know, if we use the Christian language, it's where you consult with the Holy Spirit, you know, in your choices. And hopefully that guides you into making the best choice you can, you know, and none of our choices are going to be perfect because reality isn't perfect. I mean, let's face it. And we may not find out till later that the choice was a good one or a bad one. And sometimes we can make choices that appear to be bad in the short term, but they're actually good in the long term. Sometimes we make choices that are painful in the short term and they're not good. You know, it's just, it is confusing. And that's part of what stinks about being a mortal human. We have distinct limitations that do not allow us to always know the consequences of, and actually in many cases do not allow. All we can do is project. We are amateur providences. To borrow a word from Oswald Chambers, we are definitely amateurs. We like to think we can predict the future, but in reality, we are very, very bad at that. There are too many variables. There's too many things at play to know for sure. We can make choices with confidence because we believe we know what will happen, but we really don't know. I think that's why the hamster wheel is so dangerous. I've talked about anxiety a lot in the show, is it's really easy to get wrapped up in what we think is going to happen and then get so consumed with the potential of what's going to happen that we just paralyze. We get in that analysis paralysis in which we just, because we're so paralyzed by all the potential outcomes, that we just make no choices. And that's bad. We need to be able to make choices to function. We can't get paralyzed by the potential outcomes of those choices. And sometimes we're in situations in which there just are no good choices. I mean, we don't know. And so we can't be paralyzed in those situations. We just have to make a choice and just move forward. Like, that's all we can do. So yeah, I agree. Not all choices are bad. In many cases, we don't even know whether they're bad or good. In many cases, but not all cases. Sometimes we just know the right thing. And maybe we know that through experience, you know, and sometimes that's clear. Like, if I get mad at somebody, do I punch them in the face? That seems like a bad choice. Because that choice has consequences. It does. The choice of just becoming violent amidst anger has an obvious choice. Like, that's a pretty easy one to navigate. A hard one to navigate, and I've talked to people about this in the past, the hard one to navigate is, what if you discover someone betrayed you? Like a loved one. Or in a relationship. What if you discovered that? I mean, is there an obvious choice to that? Well, I don't know. I guess it depends on the extent of the betrayal. It depends on how much history you have with them. It depends on whether you contributed in any way to that betrayal. You know, it's like, that's a loaded question. That's a tough one to respond to. So yeah. Becky also says, throw a pebble toward a still, peaceful body of water and watch it vibrate outward. That's an example of cause and effect. That's good imagery. Like, you throw a stone in the water and you see the ripple. And the reason I do like, thank you for sharing that. The reason I like that imagery is because you don't always know where the ripples are going to go. Actually, that reminds me of a quote. That reminds me of a quote. No single drop of rain thinks it's responsible for the flood. I'll say that again. No single drop of rain thinks it's responsible for the flood. So, like, those single drops have all those ripple effects, and those ripple effects accumulate. And then over time, there's a flood. And then every drop doesn't sit around and go, well, this isn't, every raindrop instantly goes, well, this isn't my fault. It's like, no, but we, in a lot of ways, on broad scale problems, we contributed to it. We may not be responsible as a whole. And this is great for like cultural things. Like if you look at the grand scheme of how things, like if you look at the foundation of the quote of this show, it says politics are downstream from culture, but culture is downstream from wisdom. It's like all of us contribute to the final end game. Like we have our small contribution to the flood, or not necessarily the flood, but the grand scheme of things. And we don't think we have responsibility for it. And a lot of times we don't see that ripple effect for decades, and what we're dealing with culturally now is the result of decisions that were made a while ago as a ripple effect. We don't think about things in that context. So the choices we make today have an impact. We just may not see in the long term what that impact is. We may not even be around or alive when that impact happens. I bet you didn't expect at 6 a.m. to tune in and realize you had a small corner of responsibility to anyone and everything, did you? But we do. We all have some degree or participation in that huge story that is unfolding. And we can choose to be on the right side or the wrong side of that history, And I honestly think the best thing we can do, and because I'm an individualist, I think the best thing we can do is try to be the best version of ourselves. I think that's really all we can do in the grand scheme of things, because I think if we find mastery over that small corner of our reality in being the best version of ourselves we can be, then the ripple effect, we had no control over it anyway, but at least we know that we did our best to have that positive impact over time. That's kind of all we can do. We don't have control over the consequences. We are free to choose, but we are not free from the consequences of those choices. Christy says, like your own mom, or like your own mother. Georgia says, William Hodges. Is William Hodges the gentleman who said the quote, no single drop of rain? I'm going to look that up. Single drop rain responsible flood. Looks like it was actually by, I don't know. This one says Douglas Adams, but it is the internet. Not everything the internet says is true. So I'm not sure who William Hodges is. I should probably know that. But I'm so bad with names. Oh, he's an English painter. I got you. So yeah, that looks like that's it for the discussion time for today. And before we close out for the show, remember this show is brought to you by Audible, where listening is the new reading. Get unlimited access to thousands of audiobooks completely free for 30 days. Sign up right now at audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. That's audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. My name is Craig Chamberlain. This is the Wisdom Worth Knowing podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on your favorite network. We are virtually everywhere at this point. YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. And if you're just doing podcasts or into podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. I do know that we've also expanded to most of the major sub-podcast networks. So if you have a favorite podcast app, you can likely find us there, if not today, within the next couple of days or weeks, because it does take a little bit for those third parties to index us. If I'm not there and you wish I was there, please send me an email or just message me on Facebook. My email is craig@craigthetechteacher.com. I know it's kind of a weird one for you guys, but that was my old domain. That was an old show I did. It's kind of archived at the moment. I might reopen it at some point. But until next time, remember, you are free to choose, but are not free from the consequences of that choice. So let's work on being the best version of ourselves we can today. Thank you for stopping by. I will see you tomorrow morning. Have a great day.